Hi everyone, this is Donna, Aust, and we are continuing in the book of James. Today we will look at chapter 1, verses 26 through 27. I'll read it. If anyone thinks themselves to be religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Now, this first verse brings back distant memories of Sunday mornings when getting my 4 little boys ready for church felt more like I was dodging bullets than preparing my heart for worship. Maybe you can relate. You make every attempt to get your kids dressed, fed, and cleaned up, all while intercepting the crying, screaming, and fighting. And the patience you thought you had quickly vanishes when suddenly, out of nowhere, these unrecognizable guttural sounds and choice words fly out of your mouth that shock even yourself. Now, following this shameful outburst, you enter church, and while praising the Lord, you begin to feel a little bit like an imposter than a follower of Jesus. Well, this is the idea James is driving at in this first verse. We can deceive ourselves in believing we are good Christians because we go to church, attend a Bible study, or serve in a ministry. But according to James, our outward displays of devotion is meaningless if we fail to control our tongue. Here, James is suggesting that the inward reality of genuine faith is measured in and by what we say, our speech. In multiple gospel accounts, we hear Jesus say, out of the overflow, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. We have heard a lot lately about the power of our words in Proverbs. If our speech is filled with rude, lewd, untrue, condescending words, according to James, we deceive our own heart. And that kind of religion, James says, is worthless, empty, powerless. Now, as believers, we know that our faith is a fluid and sanctifying process, and we must always balance James's theology of being doers of the word with Paul's message of grace. And if we believe that James' warning is for us, we might need to get to the root of these destructive words. What's behind them? What's motivating them? And we can ask God to reveal and change our hearts, like David cried out in Psalm 139. Search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Now, moving on to verse 27, James reminds us that caring for the helpless, whether they be widows and orphans, immigrants, the handicapped, or the homeless, this is a religion that is pure and defiled before God. If we lack any compassion for those in need, James would say our religion is worthless. We see in Matthew 23, Jesus rebuking the Pharisees for their neglect of justice and mercy in exchange for empty rituals. Matthew 23:23, Jesus says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness." Throughout the Bible, we see God's desire for justice. Israel's obedience was measured by their care for widows and orphans. Jesus modeled this perfectly. He loved the unlovable. He advocated for the forgotten. And he rewrote the definition of neighbor in a way that compels us to see our neighbor as anyone who is in need. But Jesus went further than that. Because of our sin and our guilt, someone had to pay the price. And since we are the guilty ones, we should be the ones to pay it. But Jesus, in his grace, in his mercy, in his extravagant love, took the penalty upon himself by dying on a cross in our place, so justice could be served and we get to go free. In his book, Generous Justice, Tim Keller says this: if a person has grasped the meaning of God's grace in his heart, he will do justice. If he doesn't live justly, then he may say with his lips that he is grateful for God's grace, but in his heart he is far from him. If he doesn't care about the poor, it reveals that at best he doesn't understand the grace that he has experienced, and at worst he has not really encountered the saving mercy of God. Grace should make you just. And finally, this is the last point about being unstained from the world. When I read this, I could not help but think how often my family would come home to see a huge stain on my shirt after I've cooked dinner. It's usually because I forgot to put on the apron. Everyone sees it, everyone laughs, and it's very distracting. That is what happens when we allow the culture to inform our views and attitudes as Christians. It's distracting. And James implores us to remain unstained by the world. Instead, let's make every effort for our lives to be so distracting for Jesus that they want what we have.